Hello everyone, TLSG here, back again with another Marvel Snap video. It's that time of day again where we're able to pull a mystery card and we'll draft a deck around that mystery card. But before we pull the card, and I feel like I'm saying this in almost every single video, thank you guys so much for your continued support, feedback, and just positivity. I truly mean it when I say that I don't think this channel could be possible without the support and the feedback and the encouragement that you guys have given. And then we did set up both a Discord for the channel and YouTube memberships. If you want more information about either, it's going to be in the description down below. There will be a link to both. Okay, and with that out of the way, let's go ahead and pull our mystery cards, see what we're working with today. We have Aero. So Aero is one that we've been looking forward to. Aero being a 5 cost 6 power card with a really cool on reveal ability. On reveal, move all enemy cards played this turn to this location. So there are a couple of cool ways to make this card work. So one of which being in a general disrupt deck or one with Kingpin, and then the other being partnered with a Death Wave combo. With the Death Wave combo, you can drop Death on turn 6 after you do a wave, and you can drop one additional card. If that card that you drop is Aero, you can control where their resources and where that power is going. And so this is a card that I have been excited to pull because I want to try out and I want to experiment. So we're going to go ahead and head over into building a deck, and then we will be right back. All right, so we were able to draft a deck. This one didn't take us nearly as long as our Electro deck, just because if one of our combo pieces doesn't fit or doesn't feel great, as long as the other combo pieces kind of come in and hold their own, sometimes you don't necessarily need every single card in your 12 card deck. But in the Electro, if you dropped Electro and then you didn't have a way to high power output, it really limited what we were able to do. So with this one, we did end up going with a version of Aero where we are looking to move the opponent's cards around. We are looking to kind of push them into different lanes, destroy those cards with the Kingpin ability. So Kingpin being on reveal next turn, destroy cards that move here. Now this is a difficult ability to trigger because if we're going up against a zoo deck that swarms the board, they can just dump their cards into the Kingpin location. If the cards are there, we can't move any cards into it, and so then it eliminates that upside of having that Kingpin effect. I don't think this is going to be the strongest version of an Aero deck, but I do think it is going to be a very fun one to play. So really quickly, running through our combos. So a lot of what this deck is revolved around is revolving around Kingpin and being able to on reveal next turn destroy cards that move here. So with that, we need a lot of opponent card move engines. So a way to move their cards into those lanes. So the first one that we have is Juggernaut. Now this one is a little bit unreliable because you can't guarantee where those cards are going to go. But if you need just a Hail Mary pass, Juggernaut could potentially do the job in a pinch. We have Polaris. So Polaris is here to either move a 1 cost card into a lane of the opponent so that we cap out that lane. That way we can kind of guarantee what power level we need to win that location. Or it's here to act as a really cheap way to initiate our Juggernaut combo in that it can move at least one or 2 cost card, and so then you do get a little bit of upside out of that. And if you can guarantee that you get that upside, maybe that's enough to win the rest of the game. We have our new card in Aero. So Aero on reveal, move all enemy cards played this turn to this location. So if spacing allows, you are going to be able to move 3-4 cards into a lane and destroy them all if it is a Kingpin lane. So the power and the potential of Aero is very, very strong. But the only issue or drawback is that if there's not enough space to move those cards into those lanes, or maybe they're passing to drop an Infinite, you're not able to guarantee that you're going to get much upside or any upside out of it. And then our last move engine is Magneto. So Magneto is a large 6 cost 12 power card with on reveal move all opposing 3 and 4 cost cards to this location. So we can use this to trigger things like Devil Dino, Moon Girl, Bishop, just to name a few. There are a lot of really common 3 cost 3 drop cards that you'll be able to pull in with Magneto into a Kingpin lane if spacing allows, and end up destroying them, and it could really swing a game in your favor. Now, what are the cards in the rest of the deck designed for? So Sunspot is an early drop. That way we could try to capture a lead early and then maybe follow up with a Storm so that we can lock down one of our lanes early, and then all we have to do is move their cards between the remaining 2 lanes to try and lock down one of those. So if we're able to destroy 1, maybe 2 cards after locking down and winning the Storm location, that gives us a pretty good upside to try and win one of those other remaining 2 lanes. We have Wave. So Wave is our only major counter against Swarm type cards in this deck. So this deck really operates around not having the opponent swarm their cards and swarm their spots on the board where they're full. So Wave is going to kind of slow down their play and allow us to counterplay a little bit and push power whenever they're only able to push out one of their low cost cards. We have Jubilee. Jubilee acts as a draw mechanic to thin your deck a little bit. So Jubilee primarily will pull in Chavez, but she could also pull in things like Sarah, like Aero, Odin, to get some additional upside and thin your deck even further or give you just additional upside on the board. We have Sarah. So Sarah ongoing, cards in your hand cost 1 less. So this one feels like the least impactful or least effective card, but the idea behind the Sarah in this deck is if we drop a wave on turn 3, so let's say we don't draw into our move mechanics. You can drop a wave on turn 3. On turn 4, we can drop Sarah. That allows us to, on turn 5, drop Odin into the wave lane. And then on turn 6, we can drop 2 cards. So we'd be able to drop a Chavez and a Magneto. We could drop a Magneto and an Aero to pull any cards they play that turn out. A lot of cool upside out of this potential combo, even if it is a little bit harder to pull off. And then the last one that we haven't covered is Chavez, and Chavez just acts as a way to kind of make the rest of your draws throughout the game a little bit more consistent, and she's not a bad card to top deck into on turn 6 with this style of deck, knowing that maybe sometimes we'll just need that little bit of extra power push in, let's say, a lane that we capped out with Polaris. And maybe 10 power is going to do that trick. We can get the extra upside and we can swing the lane because of it. That is the general idea of the deck list. I am going to go ahead and jump in, but if you guys are interested, let me know in the comments down below. I also have a version of a Death Wave style deck using Aero that I think would be pretty good. I think it'd be a little bit more consistent than this style of deck. But if that is something you want to see, let me know in the comments down below and I can make it happen. Let's go ahead and jump into a few games. Okay, so first up we have Core Blow. And in our hand, we do have our Kingpin and our Aero. So as long as we can make sure that they don't flood the board, then we could pretty easily get this combo off, or hopefully be able to get this combo off. And so we're going to go ahead and pass this second turn. But the biggest issue that I think we're going to have with this deck is running out of board space. So I thought about teching in a Killmonger instead of the Polaris. That way, if they do flood the board with 1-drops, we can clear them and create that additional space to be able to drag their cards around. But that would require us to drop the Sunspot for a 2-drop or something similar, and I don't know what would work best in that situation. So I think what we do here is we're going to drop our Polaris into the hub. That is going to draw one of their squirrels over into this area, almost locking down the lane for them. And they do drop a card in the lane, so that ends up capping out this location very, very early. So I think just off of that, we could snap, but we're going to go ahead and play a Kingpin this turn, and then maybe they won't avoid the lane. Most of the time when you see Kingpin, you don't play resources in that lane because you are anticipating, ooh, and they dropped a cloak. So how fortunate for us. So if they decide that they're going to drag these cards over, they are going to get hit with the Kingpin Wombo combo. And then we are going to drop the Aero, which the move will happen first. And then let's say they drop resources here or they drop resources here. That may hit a double trigger. So let's go ahead and lock in the Aero here. They do move a squirrel over. It is going to, oh no, their Killmonger goes off first. So that's okay. But then they drop a Lady Sif, which discards their Sarah. We're going to pull their Lady Sif and their Killmonger over to destroy both of them. So if you have the lane space, very, very phenomenal combo, very, very satisfying. And then unfortunately, we do get the low roll. We do switch hands here, and we sent them quite a bit. I wasn't really paying attention to what we sent them, unfortunately. I think what we do here is we drop our Gambit into Central Park, and then we drop a Mr. Sinister into Mindscape. We are going to be able to, right off the bat, destroy one of these 3 cards. We have a 33% chance that the Gambit roll is going to kill a Wolverine and just bounce him around. And so actually, if that's the case, let's go ahead and do let's go ahead and split our resources. We're going to put resources into the hub. We're going to put resources into Mindscape, knowing that there is a 66% chance that Gambit is going to destroy one of these two cards. If it destroys Wolverine, it's going to push that power into one of these other two lanes. If it destroys Cloak, then we get the upside anyways. So let's go ahead and play off of that. They do only drop one card, so if we can get a good roll here, we get the Cloak, so we get the really lucky break there, so that we can win these two. They have Magneto, which is going to pull a lot of our resources, but not enough to win them either of these lanes, very luckily. And then not enough to win them the Magneto lane. So we do end up going with a three lane sweep on our first game out. So very nice showing from Kingpin on the first game that we have. Next up we have Jay Parnell. And so we draw into our Sunspot. We also draw into Storm, being our kind of lane lock combo, so that we can try to push and win an early lane. So we're going to drop our Sunspot into Atlantis. Depending on what they drop, if it's in Okoye, we will probably end up dropping Storm on turn 3 into Atlantis. That way we can lock down that... We're not going to drop Storm into Atlantis on turn 3. We're going to drop Storm into Sakaar on turn 2. Which is kind of unfortunate because we don't have any cards that we can play to support him with it being turn 2. And it looks like they're running a 1-cost deck. So we're going to have to rely on maybe a Polaris. So we could put a Polaris here. If we draw into her, that would draw out a 1 or 2 cost card. And maybe that would be enough to win the lane. Ooh, they don't drop anything there. Interesting. So they must not have had anything to play. I think we go with a cheeky attempt at a combo here. We know that no cards can be played into the flooding location. Oh, I guess it does say next turn is the last turn that cards can be played there. And so we get one additional turn to play cards into Storm, or into the flooded plane. So we're going to drop our Juggernaut, which is going to push anything that they would have dropped there. Now, ideally, we would have dropped Kingpin and then been able to follow it up with a Juggernaut, but I just don't think that's reliable enough. So we do want to lock down this flooded plane. And they may not have realized that we were able to play there for that second turn. And then now we need to decide what we are going to do. So I think what we do is we just drop a Jubilee into Atlantis. That's most likely going to pull our Chavez. On turn 5, we can drop our Kingpin here. On turn 6, we can drop Magneto. That is going to pull their Bishop, which is going to be one of their higher power cards in this Swarm style deck. It would pull that over, being a 3 or a 4 cost card. Of course, Bishop being 3, and it'd be able to destroy it as long as we have the space to move it over. And I think with it being the negative zone, it's really hard to play resources for a 1-cost Zoo deck into that area or that location. So maybe they change it with a Scarlet Witch here. And we draw into Sarah, so we can actually play 2 cards next turn. We can play both Kingpin and Wave, which is pretty nice. And so they discard their Angela, which is one of their other big units. Okay, and so now we can do a Kingpin and a Wave, and that's going to allow us to drop 2 cards next turn. So we're going to be able to drop Magneto and Chavez, and so I think we have a very solid shot here. Normally we would snap our advantage here, and now they can only play cards into the negative zone, which is a pretty difficult location to play them into. And we know that they're probably not going to max them out in that lane. And so we're going to be able to pull their Bishop over, which takes away a lot of their resources in Atlantis from the Magneto. And then we could also gamble if we wanted to. We could gamble and pull over the Polaris. So depending on what we think they can drop. If we think they can, they can only drop 2 cards here. So then we could pull over an additional 1 from Magneto, so a 3-cost card, and then Polaris is going to pull over a 1-cost card. Do we want to do that, or do we want to put 10 power here, which would make us 20, and then and we should be able to, if we're able to pull over their Bishop, that makes them a lot less. I do like the destruction kind of play line, but I think this is going to work much better. I think this is much more consistent because they're not going to be able to max out this lane, so we can guarantee that we're going to pull over this Bishop, and then that's going to destroy it over here. It's going to make them too low over here. We don't have to worry about it swinging or winning this negative zone location. I just think overall, this is the most successful play line we could have. So we pull over the bishop. Our Kingpin is just going to come in and stomp all over him. It brings their Atlantis down to 14, which we are 20. The flooded location that we locked down earlier in the game is 5, and we are still able to win the negative zone. So we are now 2 for 2, both games having won all 3 lanes. So this feels so satisfying. We have a lot more well-rounded build than we had last time, and we have a few other tools and mechanisms to get additional cards onto the board or to move their cards, and it just feels so very satisfying so far. Let's see if we can keep it going. Next up we have Achilles. Importantly, we have bar with no name. So whoever has the least power here wins. So we're going to be able to use this in a couple of different ways. We are going to be able to either try to push power into that lane from our Juggernaut, and we can do this by either trying to cap out one of their locations first, and then on the final turn we can do Juggernaut if they only have one location to play, which would leave only the bar with no name as the slot to push those cards into. And then we draw into Rock City. So do we go ahead and drop the rock there? I don't think they ever send us anything that buffs our cards. So I don't think we have to worry about that. We're going to go ahead and drop the rock. And then next turn we can start looking at kind of our play line and what we want to do. And so we can play Kingpin into a lane, play Juggernaut into the other lane, the other non-bar with no name lane. And then no matter where it pushes cards, if they play it mid, that feels kind of bad. There's no way to guarantee that they play them over to the side. So we do drop our rock. Our next location is Kamar Taj. So we're going to be able to do some little things with that, but nothing huge, I don't think. We could also do the Kingpin into Juggernaut combo that I was thinking of, and then if they drop their resources here, then that's okay because they're going to cap this out. If they drop it here, we are going to push their cards either into bar with no name or push it over into Subterranea to help cap that one out. And then honestly, maybe we need to push some power into Subterranea before it gets locked out. Let's go ahead and lock in the Juggernaut. Ooh, we do get the upside that they drop 2 cards into Kamar Taj. And so let's see, it destroys one and we don't even get to know what it was. So interestingly enough, we have no idea what that card was, and we will never know. Unless Achilles, unless you are watching this, what was that card that we destroyed? I wish we knew. This being turn 5, we could do something like an Aero, which would pull all but the last card that they drop over here. We could do a Storm of our own, or we can do Polaris here, which would potentially pull over 2 rocks. It would potentially pull over a Storm and a rock. And then if we can lock down this lane, that gives us a better chance of winning overall, I think. And if we pull their Storm, then I guess they don't have a whole lot of resources in that flooding plane. I'm curious what they drop, but I think we're going to go with the Polaris here. We do pull over 1 rock and then another rock. They do a Mojo, but that's not going to trigger. They do cap out Kamar Taj with our double Polaris, so that works very well in our favor here. It looks like the best play line that we're going to be able to do is just finish this off with Chavez. They have 4 cards, so they could have any number of things, but they're not able to play here. They're not going to get the big upside out of that Mojo buff from us having both of these locations locked down. We do know that we're going to win this location unless they have a Patriot, because that'd be 2, 4, 6. That would put them at 9, which with the rocks could be a chance. But most of those rocks were generated just because of Kamar Taj, so I think it's worth the risk. I think maybe a Blue Marvel, maybe a Spider Woman, maybe something along those lines, maybe even a Goblin that they try to sneak over for some reason, even though they know we only have 1 spot left. I think Polaris was the MVP here, being able to block off their Kamar Taj though. And so they have the Hulk, which is 11 power, but it is not enough to come up over our Kingpin America Chavez duo here. So very, very fortunate for us that we were able to do just a couple of things. We were able to kill one of their cards, which we don't know what it was. It could have been a Goblin, which would have came over into our lane. Probably not, because Camartage would have sent it right back. It could have been a hazmat. We just don't know what that was because it got destroyed before it even got flipped. Next up we have Naku, and the first location is Atlantean. So if they are a swarm style deck, Atlantean makes you dump your hand as quickly as possible, because on turn 4 you're going to shuffle whatever cards you had left. You would shuffle them in. But that's no longer going to be the case because we got World Ship as our second location. So I think we drop our Sunspot here. We want to leave the lane or the space open for some higher power cards, some higher power plays. They have a Juggernaut, but it's not going to be able to send our card anywhere. I'm sorry about that. Sorry about that, Naku. And so on turn 5, we could always drop our Sarah. So we do want to drop at least one card this turn. I think we go with the highest cards that we have available. And so Polaris is going to be number 1. Next turn right now, it looks like we're going to do Aero. And then followed by Magneto. Is that going to be enough? Probably not. It's really difficult to do since we are wanting to move their cards around the board, and now we can't. But let's see what they are so confident about. They snap. So do they have a Shang-Chi? And so that tells me that they probably have an Odin. That they are going to drop on the last turn to re-trigger Shang-Chi because they snapped. Unless they have an Infinite here, and at which case we end up losing. So if they pass here, they don't. So good, they don't pass here. They play their Ghost Rider. We have cards that are all under that 9 power spread, and I kind of think we continue along that. So if we do, let's say 4 power here, we're going to get 2 power here, so that's going to end up being 6 power, and then they are all under that, so that makes it 21. So unless they have something that is over 12 power, they're not going to be able to swing this lane. And so I anticipate an Odin here, but it's not going to be able to target the cards that they need it to target. So let's go ahead and drop our Kingpin. He is not going to be within that Shang-Chi-able range. They do drop their Odin, which would have been a sneaky play had we not been playing heads up, but we were able to recognize because of the snap. The snap into the Shang-Chi let me know that he was confident in that play particularly. And so because of that, we were able to change our strategy. And instead of doing our high power cards, so like last turn, we would have dropped our Magneto, we would have dropped our Chavez, and they would have won the game. But because of that one particular read, we were able to adjust our strategy and win. So next up we have Beardellini, and we do have our Sunspot. I'm gonna drop it into the unknown location. They drop theirs into Central Park, and so now we can kind of battle the inverse or the opposite locations. Neither of us get the upside in the Superflow. And then we are going to go ahead and pass here. They snap off of something. So some play line that they have, they feel confident in. So they use Lady Sif to discard their Ghost Rider. So if they hold that until the last turn, we can maybe sneak that away in pulling a card over and capping out the lane. So I think for this turn we're going to drop Wave. We're going to see how quickly they drop their Ghost Rider to capitalize on that 20 power swing upside. And so they drop it almost instantly. So now we know exactly where we stand. If we had a Shang-Chi, that would be great. They allowed us an opportunity to play into it there. But we don't at this point. So we could drop our Sarah, which is going to allow us to drop 2 cards next turn. And then on the final turn, we could drop 2 cards as well. I think maybe we go with that. They have Iron Man here, so it's going to be difficult to win. And so I think this turn, what do we do? I think we set up a potential Kingpin play in pulling their card over into this lane with our Polaris. It could pull this squirrel, it could pull this squirrel, it could pull Sunspot. But either way, it's going to kind of let us know where we stand. No, that's not what we want. It would let us know where we stood, but that would most likely end up being more power than we could push out into that lane. So we're going to go ahead and go with it though. I think they drop resources into Central Park this turn. And so they do. And then they do Wave. But since we have Sarah, we are going to be able to drop 2 cards on that final turn. And so we're going to pull their Psylocke over into the super... Well, I guess we don't know that for sure, do we? We're going to pull their Squirrel over into the Superflow. So we know that we just need to beat 6 power in that lane, which is very, very doable, especially with us being able to drop such large cards. So I think what we end up doing here, we go with the Magneto mid, even though we only need 12 power. I think we go with the Magneto. That way it's not going to pull their Ghost Rider or their Wave over into this lane and potentially swing it or ruin it for us. And then they have the Wave, so they could have a Giganto, but we're going to have 20 power here. A Giganto would end up putting them at 16. And so I don't think they have a play line to win here. And so let's go ahead and maybe they forgot about our Sarah, but let's go ahead and lock in this final turn. I anticipate just a large card, so Chavez, which is not a great card for that final turn, but we do have a Chavez of our own. We do have a way to bump up and buff up the Superflow. So luckily we were able to pull that card over with Polaris to cap out the Superflow in a low power card instead of a large high power Chavez or something similar. So we didn't get an incredible upside or a high roll with our Kingpin, but our little move mechanisms are enough to sometimes lock out and sneak out a lane lock. That way you can easily adjust your power dispersion to figure out where you need to play your power. And so with that last game out of the way, I am going to go ahead and end the video here. Now this deck felt very fun to play. It felt awesome whenever a Kingpin did trigger, but getting a Kingpin to trigger consistently when Swarm is in the meta is very, very difficult. I don't think this is the strongest version of an Aero deck. I think that is going to be a Death Wave deck where you sub in an Aero. That way on the last turn you can drop if you are ahead in 2 lanes, you can drop your Aero into that 3rd lane that you're losing already. You can drop your Death into one of the other lanes, and you can guarantee that you are going to continue to have that upside after that turn resolves. But nonetheless, the Kingpin Aero combo is fun. It's just not as consistent because there are so many ways to kind of counter it. If you are a Zoo style deck, all you have to do is flood that location, and unless they can drop a Juggernaut to push those cards out and then a card to pull them back in, which is really difficult in the tools that we have and just having those tools in hand if we had them available. It's a little bit less consistent than a deck where you can consistently push out that high power output. But nonetheless, this was a very fun card. I've been looking forward to Aero. I am going to utilize her in a few other decks. Let me know if you want to see at least 1 or 2 of those versions, and I can make a video on those as well. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I am going to go ahead and end it here. This has been TLSG. Later, guys.